Very good. Thank you very much. We will take roll. David Beckham. Present. Ted Cook. Here. Buchanan Davis. Patrice Horseman.
Present.
Can we turn up the volume for the online? I think I heard you say present, Patrice.
I am present virtually.
All right, thank you. Drew John. Tim Tamir.
Here.
Pete Kim. Here. And Jonathan Lyons. We have a quorum. And now calling on the non-voting members. Elizabeth Alvarado Thorson.
Here.
Tom Bushowski. Thank you, Lainey. Gail Griffin. Lauren Kuby.
Here. Virtually.
Karen, thank you. Karen Peters.
Here.
Good morning, Karen. Robin Saeed. TJ Shope. Stephanie Stahl Hamilton. And Sandra Watson. Roll call is complete. For the record, please remember to identify yourself in making a motion or requesting to speak. Please ensure you are unmuted for any votes. For those in the room, please remember to leave the microphones on the table. Microphones on the table for sound quality purposes. In addition, if any board member wishes to depart the meeting at any time, please announce your departure for the recorded meeting minutes. For the disclosure for conflicts of interest, Joe, have we received any disclosures?
Morning, Joe Satelli, General Counsel. No disclosures have been submitted for today's meeting.
If a conflict of interest does arise, would you please declare your conflict during the meeting? We will have agenda item number 3, a 20-minute informational presentation on cybersecurity on Arizona's water systems, and Garrett will lead the discussion.
So I know it says I will lead the discussion,
Okay.
but I am not a cybersecurity expert and I don't claim to be. Before I pass it over to our guests, I just kind of want to give a little bit of a highlight because I think context is important. I had another speaker lined up. Unfortunately, they weren't able to make it. Just some numbers from a 2024 EPA report. We have about 170,000 water systems nationwide that are facing increasing cyber attacks from nation state actors and criminals. Recent federal assessments found that about 9% of major drinking water systems have critical cybersecurity vulnerabilities. And yet that funding represents less than 1% of what we need to solve that problem. So I have Ryan Murray with us again. I think some of you may have remembered when he joined us before. And I have Steve from ADQ here to give us a presentation on the things Arizona is doing.
All right. Ryan and Steve, thank you. We'll turn the time over to you.
I don't have a clicker, so I guess I'll just ask you to move forward. Good morning, Chairman and members of the board.
Can you flip the mic? It should be green when you talk, I think.
Yes.
Right?
How about now? Good.
There you go.
Thank you so much. Thanks again for having us back. As you may remember, last year we put together the State of Arizona Water and Wastewater Cybersecurity Action Plan in partnership with DEQ, DEMA, and a few others. We wanted to come back and talk to you guys at Garrett's request and at your request to talk more about what we've done in the last year. Next slide, please. There we go. So really, again, hammering home the fact that water and wastewater systems continue to be under attack. I know Garrett mentioned the OAG report, specifically mentioning that significant number of water systems continue to have critical and high vulnerabilities. We're also seeing them directly under attack by nation-state threat actors. So specifically here, water supplier American Water. You guys probably saw this in the news. Pretty significant attack, took their systems offline. Didn't directly impact water delivery systems, but was impacting sort of the business system, similar to what we saw with Colonial Pipeline, where the business systems were attacked and they took them offline, so there wasn't transition into the OT environment. We're also seeing an Arkansas city water treatment plant was taken offline and again attacked by nation-state threat actors. And then Texas City warns thousands of utility payment sites as part of their breach. So again, most of this is impacting IT environments, not OT environments, but most organizations that we talk to don't necessarily have that delineation between the two, or they want to make sure that that transit doesn't happen between those environments. Next slide, please. I also want to talk a little bit more broadly because while these are not water systems that are under attack, showing that this is happening here, right here in our backyard. So hoax Russian bomb threats target Arizona polling sites during the last general election. And then Arizona woman serving 8 years for identity theft scheme benefiting North Korea. This one is a little more interesting in that she was hosting laptops in her apartment to allow North Korean IT workers to appear as if they are coming from Arizona when they're applying for jobs. We've seen this exact scheme impacting state agencies in the past. So we've seen contractors and subcontractors that are getting hired back. And through several of our partners, we've identified intelligence that points these directly to North Korean IT workers. And then, of course, most recently, the Arizona Secretary of State's website being defaced by what we believe are Iranian or at least Iranian-associated hackers. So most of this, again, just to highlight the fact that even though these are not water and wastewater systems, that we do have nation states knocking on our doors here in Arizona, and we are essentially on the front lines attempting to defend ourselves from these sophisticated attacks. Next slide, please. Okay, so I don't know where my
Can I pause you right there?
Of course.
Pete had a question.
It's okay, I'll hold today.
You sure? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I don't know where my title went on this, but essentially what started all of this last year was the NSC and EPA administrator issued letters to all the governors of all the states, essentially saying provide a plan for how you're going to protect water and wastewater systems from cybersecurity attacks. We complied with this. I know several other states didn't because this was not a requirement to do so, but we obviously, and you generously saw the interest here in making sure that we can provide information on how we're protecting our water and wastewater systems. So we responded to this letter and put together our statewide cyber action plan in coordination with many organizations as well as the governor's office, and submitted this to NSC and EPA by the June 28th deadline last year. And in the intervening time since July of last year to now, part of our plan was to essentially conduct surveys to see, focusing very specifically on those organizations that serve 3,300 customers or more that are already required to be doing some amount of cyber protections. We wanted to focus on them as a priority. So we sent out these surveys requesting them to provide information back, and we've gotten varying degrees of success. If you can go to the next slide, please. So just reiterating again, this was the high level of what our action plan was. The first step was to assess current cybersecurity practices. So essentially reach out to these systems and say, what are you doing? Are you doing any sort of cybersecurity assessment? Do you have a cybersecurity program in place? And if not, encourage them to start doing some type of assessment. Understand where your vulnerabilities are. Obviously, the OIG report highlights that we continue to have a significant amount of them. We want to know where they are before the bad guys can take advantage. The next step of this was to ensure that their risk mitigation plans are in place and that they had some amount of cybersecurity incident response as part of it, and then assist them in developing a more comprehensive risk mitigation plan if they didn't have one, and then work on following up with them regularly to make sure that those plans are getting implemented, essentially identifying these vulnerabilities and make sure that they're patching or addressing them in a timely fashion. The third part of this was to verify their emergency response plans. Again, all of these large organizations that serve 3,300 customers or more are supposed to have, as part of their ERPs, a cyber incident response component. As you'll see in a moment, most of them don't, even though it is required. And then working with them to update this emergency response plan and their incident response plans, and then conduct exercises, which we'll get to in a minute here. Next slide, please. So this just, again, talks through sort of the workflow, what that looks like. Again, doing some surveys to identify, is anyone doing cyber assessments? Do they have a risk mitigation plan? Do they have an ERP or a cyber incident response plan? And then working through the process of how these pieces sort of interconnect to make sure that we can get them to a better state. Next slide. Okay, so of the systems that we surveyed, we sent out emails to 141 systems, prioritizing those that serve 3,300 customers or more. Of the respondents, we got back 119. I think it might have actually been 120 responses. I think one came in a little bit late here. So of the ones that we sent out, 84% responded, which is a pretty good response rate. Yeah, there you go. There's the title. The ones that we asked, have you done a cybersecurity assessment recently? Only 35% said yes. Interestingly, a handful of them said, I don't know, which is maybe even more concerning. Of those that we asked, do you have a risk mitigation plan or an incident response plan in place? Only 33 said yes, so 28%. Again, not a significant number here that know that they have a risk mitigation or incident response plan. And then also potentially more concerning is the number of systems that responded back that they would not be sharing any information with us on this at all. Whether that was asking for direct copies of their incident response plans or cybersecurity assessments, so we could evaluate whether they were effective or provide some additional assistance with them. So 26% of those, a little over a quarter, said, sorry, we're not going to share this with you. We have no statutory requirement. You have no authority to ask for it. And we believe it's a greater risk to us to share this information than to continue to keep it secret. So I'll pause there if there's any questions on the survey results.
Anybody else? Lots of them.
Yeah, lots of questions.
Yeah.
If you want, we can wait to the end, but okay. Next slide, please. So I also wanted to highlight some of the things that we're doing well, that we've been partnering with a couple of other organizations. If you haven't heard of the DEF CON Franklin project, this was established last year as part of the DEF CON Hacker Conference. So Jake Braun, the former Deputy National Cyber Director in the previous White House, has started up a volunteer water and wastewater cybersecurity force, essentially to go out there and work with water and wastewater systems to put volunteer cybersecurity professionals together with water and wastewater systems that need the assistance in addressing these vulnerabilities and these security gaps to try to get them the support and assistance they need. So we've been meeting with this organization over the past 6 months or so and working with DEQ to prioritize 15 systems that we think would be good potential pilot candidates to receive the assistance from these volunteers. We haven't quite yet figured out how we're going to put boots on the ground, who those volunteers are going to be, but we've at least identified those systems and reached out to them, and there seems to be some initial interest in receiving this help. Next slide, please. I also want to highlight again, since part of the cyber plan was for us to put together an exercise, we've been working with EPA. So essentially towards the end of this year, I believe in November, we're going to run an all-day workshop partnering with EPA, with DEQ and my office to bring all these water systems and their IT and cyber professionals together to review their incident response plan and then assist with building an incident response plan or updating an incident response plan to make sure it incorporates all the requirements that EPA is asking for. And a follow-up to that is going to be the next month in December. We're going to have EPA on site to conduct a statewide tabletop exercise with all of those participants, as well as their IT and cyber professionals, so we can make sure that we're all talking to each other and then training on those incident response plans that were built. So once we have those plans put together, let's actually test and train them to make sure that they're functional. And if not, afterwards, as a follow-up to this, is going to be, let's update those plans to make sure that they're more relevant to what happened in this exercise. Next slide, please. I also want to highlight that we are, again, running our statewide cyber summit in December. We're going to have a specific track focused on critical infrastructure protection, including water and wastewater. So this last year brought together about 625 cyber and IT professionals from across public sector, as well as many of the vendors in the space and a lot of our federal partners to get together and talk about our cyber challenges within state and local government. This year specifically, we wanted to have a focus on critical infrastructure protection, and we're going to make sure that water is a big focus of that. And I think that's the last slide.
Questions from the board? Pete?
I've definitely got some, but.
Yes. Dave?
I think you said that roughly 15% didn't respond and roughly 26% said they're not going to share anything. Were any of those any of the major cities in Arizona?
So I'd have to go back and look at the data. I don't know off the top of my head, Karen. I don't know if you remember, or Steve, I don't know if you remember. There were definitely some of the larger organizations. Part of that could be because they just didn't have the information to share at the time. Also keep in mind that we were only focusing on those 141 systems that are of that sort of top echelon of customers they serve.
Well, 3,300 customers or
Correct,
more, but
which
they're
should be all of the large cities.
sure, but there are a very small number that serve a whole lot of people.
Indeed.
3,300 is pretty low threshold,
Indeed.
but you don't know if
Off-
I'd love to know if the city of Phoenix responded.
Off the top of my head, I don't know,
Scottsdale,
but we could certainly provide that information back to you.
Okay.
Yes.
Just a clarification on David's question here. So just a clarification on the data. So the third bullet there, have done an assessment recently, 35, have a risk mitigation or incident response plan, 33, and didn't want to share any information, 32. That, the 32 and the 33 are not a subset of the 35, they're a subset of the 141.
Correct, that's correct, yes.
Okay, all right. Because that would mean
Yeah.
very few have done anything, and all of them that have don't want to communicate with.
That's correct. Yeah, there is some overlap between those systems that have said, we did an assessment, but we don't want to share, or we do have a plan, but we don't want to share. It's sort of the Venn diagram of overlapping. It's out of the total of those that were surveyed.
Karen, do you want to speak to any of those questions or concerns? Okay. Pete?
Yeah. Thank you for coming again.
Of course, thank you, sir.
Super important topic. And as the chairman and I were just talking about, what's the value of infrastructure that's compromised? It's negative, right? Because you can't rely upon it and you don't know. First of all, just nomenclature, what's IT versus OT?
Sure, sorry for using acronyms. IT is your sort of traditional information technology,
Yep.
right? This is your email systems, your business processing, your billing systems, all the stuff that we typically rely on, like your laptop sitting around the table. OT is the operational technology environment, so that's
SCADA,
the stuff
stuff like
that,
that.
yeah, the
Yeah.
SCADA stuff that's actually running sort of the plants and the functions of water delivery.
It seems like the majority of the actions have been around the preparation of incident response, right? What if the hits the fan?
Yeah.
And what do we do at that point? How much effort has been put into trying to figure out what percentage of the water is already compromised?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, sir. I'll say on the local government side, we have significant resources that we're providing to our cities and counties, including those that run municipal water systems. On the private sector side, I essentially have zero authority to be able to understand where those compromises might occur, what vulnerabilities might exist. So we've had to rely on our federal partners that do have those authorities. Without getting political, I'll say some of our challenges right now are we have essentially zero CISA, Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency field staff within Arizona that support cybersecurity. We have a couple of physical security people that are supporting those efforts, but the two cybersecurity advisors that were assigned to Arizona both resigned or went on to other organizations. So right now we're having to rely on temporarily assigned staff from CISA or from other regional leadership to assist with identifying when those compromises have happened and how do we provide that support to them after the fact. I will say the other piece of this, the sort of like middle section of the plan, is identifying a risk mitigation plan and identifying those vulnerabilities within those environments. So not necessarily identifying have you been compromised, but what is the likelihood of you to be compromised? So if there are vulnerabilities in your environment, especially given the OIG report that we've seen, there are criticals and highs that exist in these environments that can be taken advantage of. We also know that we're being targeted right now by nation state threat actors. So that's a terrible amount of calculus to say we have threat actors looking at us. We know we have vulnerabilities in our environments. That's just a recipe for eventually us being compromised. The challenge that we're finding, especially given some of who these threat actors are, is that they like to lay low in the environment and essentially be quiet, pre-positioning themselves for if they do need to take action. We've seen kind of both sides of this. Russia, they go hard, they go loud, they want to make a lot of noise, and they don't necessarily know what they're getting into. So they've been very visible. In fact, there was a report, I think earlier this week, that they got into a Polish water system and have just been completely noisy about it. But on the other side, some of the
Norway or Finland or something like that?
yes, Norway, yeah. So there's been a couple of them recently, specifically, obviously, around sort of like the Eastern European bloc and Europe that have been targeted. There's some stuff going on over right now.
So next question.
Yes, sir.
If I were a threat actor, I would lay low, right? You don't use weapons until you need them. And what I'm hearing, is it fair to say that we don't know what percentage of Arizona's water is already compromised at this moment, not only by maybe one, but multiple, right? Like maybe the Russians and the Chinese and the North Koreans are hanging out.
Yes. I
that
would say
fair to say?
that's a fair assessment, is we don't know. I can say
That
what we
scare
do
you?
know within government, right? I have visibility into a lot of government systems. I have almost zero visibility into the small co-ops and the privately held organizations. And even then, there's some gaps in our visibility.
Next question. Can I'm sure this is, public, but I'd like to get a copy of the plan letter. Right,
Yeah,
just to kind of
absolutely.
Review it. The surveys that we sent out to folks at these various places, were they qualified to answer?
That's a great question. Hard to say, because again, a lot of these smaller organizations, they may not have IT or cyber staff that are dedicated to responding to these things within their organizations. The larger ones, absolutely qualified to respond. City of Phoenix, for example, or City of Chandler. Some of the smaller entities, hard to say.
Yeah. Given that this is kind of important, why are we relying on volunteers?
I would say the candid answer is we have nothing else, right? My staff is limited. Our federal partners are limited. Local government partners are incredibly limited. We're trying to find creative solutions, knowing how important this is, that we have to continue to find ways to identify these threats, identify these vulnerabilities, identify if and when we've been compromised and respond to it. There's nothing else. So we have to find creative solutions to do it. If there's additional funding, hey, there's a finance authority that is responding to this. If there's additional funding to assist these organizations with this, I think that's something that we absolutely need to explore as well.
Okay. Last comment and question. Thank you for trying to find creative solutions. I like that. How much money do you need?
Phew, that's a big question. So the challenge in cybersecurity is obviously going to always be there's infinite risk for us to manage, right? And the only way to manage infinite risk is with infinite money. And we need to find some happy medium, right? From my perspective, again, we're supporting a lot of state agencies and local governments from cybersecurity perspective. Doubling my budget would be fantastic, right? Like I've got approximately $10 million to support state agencies and approximately $10 million to support local governments. That also includes K-12 school districts and some of those that maybe aren't necessarily part of the conversation with water. But I need more people, I need more funding, I need more resources and tools. And I know part of this question is going to be around, well, can't we just give that money directly to these systems and have them apply these protections, right? We found great success in doing this in the economies of scale of the state, purchasing at the state level, utilizing the Department of Homeland Security's authorities to provide these services out to these governments, essentially at no cost or low cost to them. Again, they don't have cyber talent. They don't have IT talent to be able to implement these things. Even if we were to buy them tools and technology and say, here you go make it happen, or here's funding, go protect yourself, they wouldn't necessarily know what to do with it.
You talked about doubling your budget. That gives you more ability to administer this stuff.
Correct.
But that doesn't actually touch the cost of actually cleaning this stuff, protecting it,
Sure.
ongoing, creating the incident, all that stuff. How much is that?
It's really
Again,
hard to say.
Infinite risk equals infinite money. I get
Right.
it, but like,
It's really hard to say. And I will say we're doing more than just administering the tools, right? We're providing services to these entities where we are identifying vulnerabilities, where we are monitoring for potential intrusions, where we're helping them to respond to these attacks as they occur. But that being said, I guess the question is, does it make sense to pay $50,000 to hire a security analyst that sits in, city of Casa Grande? Or are we going to have them continue to focus on doing the work that they need and provide a higher echelon of support, whether that's at the county level or the state level?
sorry, one last question. Who's doing this well?
So that's a great question. I'll say there's a couple of states that we work with that are doing this well, and I'll speak mostly at the state level because I don't have purview or visibility into what's happening at sort of all the local levels across the nation. Maryland, I think, is doing this really well, partly because they have statutory authority where the critical infrastructure that operates within the borders of Maryland is required to share this information with the state cybersecurity office. New Jersey is another one that's doing really well. They've been I'll say praised significantly by both EPA and NFA and NSC for the plan that they put together, as well as getting it implemented. Again, these are two organizations where they've recognized that this cyber challenge, that this water and critical infrastructure protection challenge is not just an IT problem, similar to what we've done here in the state of Arizona, where we've said cybersecurity is a homeland security challenge. We need to make sure that this message and mission is elevated to the level of protecting our state. New Jersey, New York, Maryland. Unfortunately, a lot of these are on the East Coast. are doing this really well. And I think part of it is funding. I think part of it is a recognition from top levels of leadership, both on sort of like the executive branch as well as legislative branch side, as well as the authorities that have been granted to them to try to solve some of these challenges. And I'd be happy to put you in touch with some of those organizations if it makes sense.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. We're gonna go online to Patrice Horseman. Patrice, the floor is yours.
Thanks. And actually, Pete Kim got a lot of it answered with individual questions, and I was going to ask an overarching question. This seemed to be precipitated through a letter to governors on, hey, what are you doing to protect your water systems? Good question, by the way. And Arizona submitting back a water plan and trying to encourage assessments. But what's next? And I know that I believe what Pete Kim was asking, what's next? What's Arizona's role in this? What are we doing? What should we be doing? And what can WIFA be doing?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam, I would say, and maybe I was remiss in saying this, Arizona is also doing this well, comparatively speaking to a lot of other states, right? Something that we are doing really well is supporting our local governments in these efforts. Again, talking about those resources that my office is providing, those services that we're providing, I think what we need to continue to do better and evaluate is how do we protect our private industry? How do we protect our co-ops? How do we protect these small rural organizations that I really don't have any purview, visibility, or authority into? How do we make sure that they're getting the resources just as much as the large guys, right? The other thing that I think we need to do better about, where we've done fantastic with this in government, both state and local government, is sharing information. So knowing that we are under attack, knowing that these attacks are going to be successful, how do we use those that do get through as early warning systems to share that intelligence, to share those indicators of attack with everyone else broadly across the community? And we've seen great success with this on sort of the generalized government sector, where if we do see an attack targeting, for example, Department of Environmental Quality, if there's an attack against their website, I can take that information and rapidly share that across the rest of the state and local government community. So essentially that attack is burned. Those threat actors can't use that attack on anyone else in the state of Arizona. Where we fail there is that intelligence loop doesn't currently include the nonprofits, the for-profits, and the co-ops that are managing just as much of the critical infrastructure and just seeing as many threats as we are.
Thank you. Do we have any additional questions or comments from the board? Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you. Just the one, Garrett? Okay.
Who was the other one?
The other one was Water Isaac. They collect data from a bunch of municipalities and different water systems across. They will probably be able to join us in October. I think their board meeting was also today and they have some other events, but I certainly would bring them if.
We would welcome a follow-up.
Okay.
What organization is he from?
Ryan?
The other fellow, yeah.
Ryan is from Homeland Security.
No, the guy who's not here.
Oh, that Water Isaac. It is, I forgot what it stands, the acronym.
Yeah.
It's the Water Information Sharing and Analysis Center. There we go.
And it's a private company?
No, I believe they're kind of a public entity.
Oh, they're a government entity?
They're quasi, aren't they?
Quasi,
Okay.
yeah.
I don't know how they fit in, so.
Yep.
Well, Garrett, could you give us a follow-up on that as far as how they do fit in to David's question? Okay, thank you. We're gonna go to agenda item number 4. Lots to actually absorb and think about right there, right?
Yeah.
All right, so we'll try to focus on agenda item number 4.
Do your best.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, board members. It is good to see you all this morning, and I do appreciate you buckling up for what's going to be a bit of a heavy talking meeting, a lot to absorb, a lot to process, but a lot of it's really important. Just a couple of things from the director's office. The first is that I get to brag a little bit about our finance team today. Denise and her team completed our annual surveillance with Fitch Ratings LLC just a few weeks ago, and I am very delighted to announce that WIFA has retained our AAA credit rating for
Nice.
another year. And Denise is going to be too humble to brag about it, but it really is due to the incredible work that her team is doing to keep us on track. So thanks very much, and we should be very proud of ourselves for that.
Thank you, Denise.
Thank you.
Pete, do you have something to say?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That is not easy.
Just a note, I have to say this, it really is a reflection on WIFA as an organization, including the board, so thank you.
Then a little bit of a formal announcement. If you remember in the last board meeting, this board did deliberate and vote or did deliberate and direct staff on solicitation amendment number 9. We did approve and publish that solicitation amendment on July 21st. This amendment clarified the scoring of pricing structure and provisions regarding the treatment of developed intellectual property in the event that WIFA terminates a contract for convenience. Chairman Cook, however, is going to offer another long-term augmentation update later in the agenda, and it's going to be a lot more exciting than that one, so I won't steal his thunder. Another thing, administratively, board members, just a quick reminder, and actually an update on our travel and per diem policy. The state recently moved over to a new HR payroll system. It's called AV 360. So that might mean that for you all, so we can process your travel reimbursements and your per diem, we may need some additional information and paperwork from you. Talk to Yolanda. She will be happy to help you. And as a reminder, she's very happy to help you with those reimbursement requests too. We make those very, very seamless. So if that's something that you've been putting off, getting those to us really early makes our staff's lives a lot easier. And by getting them to us early, I mean, tell Yolanda what you need and she does it for you. So
Yolanda does an exceptional job.
she does. She does fantastic. So just a quick reminder on that. And then last but not least, WIFA's hiring. We are expanding our projects team. So we're currently on the lookout, not for just 1, but 2 new project managers. Project managers work on Lindsay's team. They're kind of our direct line of communication between our borrowers and WIFA itself. They're what I talk about a lot that make us unique, especially for these smaller systems that don't have grant staff and don't have folks who are kind of dedicated to going out and finding funding. Our project managers are the ones that hold their hands and help them along every step of the way. So if you know anybody who you think would be a good fit, who has a really customer focused, customer service oriented kind of attitude, please send them our way. We'd love to add a couple new members to our already really fantastic team. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Are there any questions from the board for our director? All right.
I will also note for the record that Member Buchanan Davis did join us at about 9:10, so we'll just make sure we have that attendance noted.
Good to have you, Buck.
And
As he walks out.
as well as Stephanie Stahl Hamilton, non-voting member, also joined.
All right. All right, Judah, agenda item number 5. And Judah, just for the record, we'd like to kind of bring the last presentation to the attention of our legislature and legislators.
Good morning, everybody. Judah Waxbaum, WIFA's Chief of Government Affairs. We have a presentation. There we go. So with how session went, we thought it would be advantageous to come to the board and give a debrief on how it went. Every session is a little bit different. I'm going into my 9th one this year, and every year I'm told it's not always like this, so I'm not sure what it's supposed to feel like yet. So we'll break down this last one and maybe get a trend line here. Ben? So this is not meant to be a pun, but I'm going to start by breaking down the structure of the legislature since I know you don't all stalk it for a living. So with that, this is the breakdown of how we are down at the Capitol. We have divided government here. We have a Democratic governor and Governor Hobbs, and then Republicans are the majority in both the House and the Senate. You'll see those are thin majorities. That is important because here in Arizona, there is no tiebreaker. We have no lieutenant governor. The president of the Senate is a member of the body. So if it's 15-15 in the Senate, the bill doesn't progress. If it's 30-30 in the House, doesn't progress. Need 16 votes in the Senate, need 31 in the House, not optional. Ben? Now, let's break down some of the statistics of what this session looked like. So right off the bat, we were in session for 166 days. The goal in Arizona is 100. We rarely ever accomplish that. After 100 days, their per diem gets slashed. It progressively gets lower the longer they hold out. Hasn't seemed to have been much of an incentive over the last few years to go home. We actually went home earlier than the last couple of years. We set a record, one of the highest ever, about 2 years ago. This year, we had just over 1,700 bills introduced. That is an uptick from last year, but it's not an all-time high. Of that, 439 actually cleared both chambers and went all the way up to the governor. Of that, 265 were signed, 174 were vetoed. That isn't an all-time veto record for a single session here in Arizona, breaking Governor Hobbs's previous record from 2 years ago. I like to point out, though, that when we hear a lot about the legislature, I think you would think those numbers are flipped on signed versus vetoed. A lot of stuff that passes the legislature is pretty overwhelmingly bipartisan or near unanimous in its passage. And with that, I'm going to cover 3 pieces of legislation that I think are worthy of note here at WIFA that we should be paying attention to as it's implemented in law. The effective date for all this legislation is going to be later next month. So first off, all of you have heard of this one. This is House Concurrent Resolution 2016, sponsored by Representative Griffin. This was the resolution that basically said it was a mistake to previously sweep the long-term water augmentation fund. We'll get to the irony of that later. And that we support WIFA's augmentation mission, that they endorsed how we're going about this, and that WIFA is doing a methodical, well thought out process, and acknowledge that previous sweeps were a mistake. It passed bipartisanly in both chambers, bipartisan support, bipartisan opposition. That's just some of the problems we come with having to be an adult in a lot of these rooms. You're going to upset both sides of the aisle, and that's a fine place for us to be as we get to continue to progress. Ben? Up next, this was, and just to clarify, we were signed in for the previous bill. These are all bills we took a stance on down at the legislature. This one, HB 2737, this was Representative Gillette's legislation. We were signed in neutral. We were in committee to provide context on the fund. All this one simply did was it expanded the eligibility for the Water Supply Development Revolving Fund to now include reclamation and remediation projects approved by the US EPA. It's my understanding the legislator's intent behind this bill was Superfund sites and mine cleanup. So, for example, there was a mine cleanup in, I believe, Dewey Humboldt that this was thought of when the bill was passed. That cleanup specifically ended up being in the budget, but that's the kind of project this was thought of when this bill was passed. It puts 0 new requirements on WIFA. It just expands the eligibility for what that fund can consider in terms of projects. And then this one, Senate Bill 1611, you will all know this as Ag to Urban. This was sponsored by Senator Shope. The reason I bring this up is because WIFA has a role to play in this ongoing effort to wean certain communities off of groundwater and to brace for more than likely impending Colorado River cuts. We are Arizona's alternative supplies provider whenever that is mentioned down here on we need to find new supplies, sustainable supplies, renewable. That is WIFA. So as this is rolled out and we get to see how this voluntary conversion process rolls out, I think there is a big role for WIFA to play in what these communities transition to. And then we'll get to the funnest part of the session, the budget. So this year, the Long-Term Water Augmentation Fund was swept of about $85 million this year. It went mainly to a variety of other state agencies throughout the state. We don't have a discrepancy with the things that were funded, but we did sign and oppose to where the funding came from. The Long-Term Water Augmentation Fund is not a secondary rainy day fund for the state. It is an investment in our water future for the health of the state, and redirecting that funding defeats the purpose of its existence. The Department of Forestry and Fire Management got the bulk of the sweep from the fund. About 45 million of that money went to just that one agency for repayments to the federal government for previous fire cleanups and $30 million for future fire expenses. On the bottom there, you will see a couple million went to local projects. Some of these projects were actually swept from us previously before, swept back, and now swept again, to give you an idea of the fluidity of what happens down at the legislature. And then some of these projects actually came to WIFA and ended up mid-process going to the budget to get the money anyways. I'm going to make note of that because as a banking institution, it is not sustainable for the legislature to allow applicants to skirt taking on debt and getting the money for free in the budget. There's significantly less oversight in that process. There's less accountability in that. We are not just a financial institution that gives away money. We do the feasibility work. Our environmental team is amazing, and we make sure projects actually get built. We are a fiduciary steward, and that gets lost when you simply redirect the money in the budget. But we did get some money. We got $250,000 for the Water Conservation Grant Fund, which I'm thrilled of because it did not come from us. And one of the original budget proposals, they redirected it from one fund to another, so I'm happy that was scrapped. And then we're working as a pass-through for the Gila Valley Irrigation Project. So $500,000 will come to us, $500,000 will leave. We just get the glory of writing the check. So we're fine doing that as long as we're not the ones funding it through our coffers. More than willing to do that on our end. And then looking forward. So Ben and I are looking to really expand our external affairs here at WIFA. It is something we have heard from board members, and we are happy to take on the challenge. So one of the things we're growing is I gave this similar presentation to the federal, our federal committee last week, and we're looking to update our committee members and board members more frequently on what our external and government affairs looks like outside of WIFA. We are also doing more meetings with stakeholders and potential off-takers between outside groups and the ongoing off-taker advisory group that's in progress. And then we have been spending this congressional recess briefing staffs and members of our federal delegation. Chairman Lyons was able to accompany us on one of those briefings the other week. And then we are having ongoing discussions with legislative members down at the state capitol so that we are not building our message when session starts in January. You can't build it the day you need it, so it is a constant process of making sure members are aware, being briefed. I'm going down to the Capitol as regularly as ever to make sure that members know what we are up to and that no one is caught by surprise when we have big updates. And then with that, I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions from the board? Judah, that was an excellent presentation. We appreciate kind of the holistic approach to some of the challenges that we face as a WIFA board and some of the challenges of the state. I recently was made aware that we were kind of designated for a tier 1 water shortage already. I believe I shared that with you a couple of days ago. So we're already seeing less water available, and we're at an important juncture that we need to focus on the water augmentation. Otherwise, Pete?
More of a comment than a question. Great work in getting out there and talking to the legislature and things like that. We need to do more. I am talking to folks over there, and we're definitely making the efforts to put the message out there. It's not getting through because there's so much noise in the landscape, right? And just bluntly, when I talk to folks, we know who you are, we don't know what you do. That's a quote. And so it is, and when it comes time to, raid the cookie jars, because there's never enough, right? The people that you don't know about what they're doing are the ones that get caught, and we just got caught again for 80 million. So again, I'm saying that awesome job in doing what you've already done with limited resources. We need to do more, for sure. No questions asked, in my opinion.
Thank you, Judah. Yes, Karen.
Thank you. And Judith, excellent report. I've heard it already at federal programs, and so great job. I did want to just offer another observation, and that is that with regard to the capitalization grants that come from the federal government to the state revolving funds, which is what we do in the Federal Programs Committee, and how infrastructure money gets out to our drinking water and wastewater infrastructure in Arizona. The trend is very similar to what the theme that Judah is describing, and that is that congressionally directed spending is taken. So Clean Water Act, Safe Drinking Water Act, direct funds through these capitalization grants to the SRFs. More than half of it is coming off the top. In some cases, in federal fiscal year 23, more than half of the capitalization grants were swept and directed to congressionally directed projects, so that less than half came to states. And so I think that the awareness, of course, WIFA and the state funding that we get is very crucial, and we need to continue to advocate, but we also need to advocate at the federal level. so that our SRFs remain robustly funded. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Appreciate those comments. Any other comments from the board?
Actually, a question. What percentage of our efforts are focused on federal relationships as opposed to state level relationships? 50-50, 80-20?
It's probably closer to 80-20 than 50-50, just given how much of the state legislature consumes the year. We are ramping up the other percentage, but it's probably closer to 80-20 right now.
And I would also add to that, part of the reason the spread is so heavily skewed to the state is because we do have an association, I always forget the acronym, but it's called CIFA. Essentially, it's the Infrastructure Finance Association that does a lot of lobbying efforts on behalf of the SRFs. I currently sit on the board for CIFA. So there are entities out there who are helping us and helping amplify our efforts on the federal level, which kind of frees us up to do some of that state work. But as Judah said, we've been meeting in the interim and during August recess with our federal delegation specifically on many cases, this idea of congressionally directed spending chipping away at our base capitalization and just how detrimental that is.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about it from the size of the pots of money. We've got a lot of important work to do and the federal pots are bigger.
Any other questions for Judah? Pete, thank you very much. Judah, thank you very much. Agenda item number 6, Denise. Forgivable principal and financial updates.
Thank you. So one, just give the board an update on several areas that reflect kind of the year end. This one, however, reflects our forgivable principal status. So this is the amount of money we have in forgivable principal for this upcoming year. We added about 40 million to the drinking water and about 17.5 million for clean water. So we have about 101 million for drinking water projects and 31 million for clean water projects. There is about 3.9 million on today's agenda that's going to be approved. So that is just an update. Again, that takes into account federal funds that we anticipate seeing in October, but I went ahead and included them because we can award them this fiscal year. Piggybacking on what Karen just said, we're very cautious moving forward. So we're going to be somewhat cautious with this money, but we do have funds available for forgivable principals. Any questions on that? Okay, next slide, please. So I'm going to dive into just a couple of, I'm going to call it hodgepodge things that I threw together to give the board some updates on where we're at as far as the end of the fiscal year. As a reminder, we do a 5-year forecast every year. We plan to update that forecast in the fall. We do that after we do our financial statements, which we're in the process of doing our financial statements as we speak and working with the auditors. So we'll be updating that probably around October, November timeframe. But I always want to do a reflection based on the financial plan we approved last year. And again, the purpose of the financial plan is to make sure the board has its information to make good, sound financial decisions. And also, just to stress that we want to maintain that AAA credit so that we do have the ability to leverage in the future, especially if our grant funds get cut. So if we go to the next slide. So what this slide is showing you is where we're at compared to what we thought we were going to do. So if you look at the second column, we have the forecast, and we anticipated spending about 54 million, and this is loans approved, okay, not necessarily loans closed, but loans that have been approved. So we were anticipating about 55 million on SRFs and 38 million on water supply. We ended up with 65 million on SRFs and almost 61 million on the water supply. So we're outpacing what we thought we would do. This is okay because I'm going to show you another chart that shows you that disbursements have been slow. So it's okay that we've accelerated this. If you remember, part of our strategic plan is to have 100 priority communities. And I believe we're at 67 priority communities as we speak. So this is okay. We're still within our financial means. We have the goal in our strategic plan to hit 540 million by 2028. We are on track to hit that amount. I also think that when we do the financial forecast, we'll probably update these numbers, and Water Supply Development Fund is probably going to be accelerated a little bit because we seem to be awarding faster than we said. However, I preface that with, they're turning into loans, and so we'll see what the demand looks like going into the future. So next slide. All right, so here's my, I continue to miss on disbursement forecast. I admit it right away. And I missed by a lot. I think when we took a deep dive into why we're missing, these are large projects related to lead service lines, environmental type things, regulations, also loans that we awarded prior to our readiness to proceed policy. So those projects are just taking a long time to start. And so that's why we keep kind of missing this. I'm going to take that in consideration this next time. But there is some good news here. I did an analysis of loans that were before the readiness to proceed policy versus after the readiness to proceed policy. And our newer loans are starting to cash flow faster. Okay, so that's what those percentages are showing you. So, and I also want to note that 74% of our total projects are cash flowing. And we still have 512 million commitments outstanding. So we know the money is going to flow through. It's just, when is it going to flow through? So we do have cash. If you go to the next slide. So changing topics. So just to back up, we're doing fine as far as what we're awarding. We have cash. The other thing is, where are we in terms of being able to issue debt, and can we support a future issuance? As a reminder to the board, we have about $109 million of principal outstanding. That's going to be fully repaid October of 2027. Okay, so then we will have no debt. And so we may need to issue debt. We were anticipating a $200 million bond sale, and I think that was in 2028. Don't know if we're still going to need that. As we do the new financial plan, we'll work through those numbers. We don't want to issue debt too early, but we also want to make sure we can accommodate loan needs. So one piece of information that we need to keep on track of is, what does our loan portfolio look like, which is a backstop to our bonds. Okay, so what I did is I did a comparison of what our loan portfolio looked like in 2024 when we got the ratings, and did the refunding to what we look like now. And you can see there's very, very little change. We did have a little bit of an increase in what I will call non-qualified loans, but again, that reflects our priority communities. Just want to back up a little bit for those of you who may not know. We have qualified pledge loans, and these are loans that we are able to pledge to a future bond sale. They usually have high credit ratings, good financials, and many times are larger. So these are like the city of Phoenix's, the city of Scottsdale's with the AAA ratings, AA ratings. That helps our portfolio. That allows us to do priority communities. So we need the big guys to support the little guys, putting it bluntly. And so we want to maintain this portfolio. This is something else I'll be looking at as I update the financial plan. But we are definitely able to support a $200 million bond sale in the future with this portfolio as it is now. Next slide. So basically a summary, we're still on track to spend $540 million. Our disbursements are lower, but I do see some improvements, and we'll continue to work with our borrowers on that front. Our portfolio has an outstanding, this is PNI, which is $120 million. And we're in good standing to maintain that AAA rating. And we will be updating all this information in the fall of 2025. So green lights. Any other questions?
For those who don't know, like, I requested the green, yellow, red because I'm stupid sometimes and I just want to see green lights.
The only problem is I have to color in the green, and I'm not quite, it looks better on my computer than it does on the screen. I will perfect that. Any
Thank
other
you, Denise.
questions?
Do we have any questions from the board or comments? Pete, I keep looking to you.
First of all, I want to thank the
Turn your
board
mic
for
on.
always, thank you to the board and the audience for always accepting with patience my relentless questions. Couple things. One, on the disbursements thing, that's really hard. right? And so like, you're really good at stuff. And if like you're missing on this thing, it's really hard. I know that. I wonder if there's something structural we can do to make life easier on that front. The kind of, and here's what I'm talking about on that. Does the interest start running before they take the disbursement? It doesn't, right? Yeah. So, like, if I were a project, right, and I would like, didn't want to start the meter running, then I would just delay until the last possible moment and then just kind of take it. On the other hand, right, the meter's running for us because we borrowed the money and we were paying bond interest payments. And so, in effect, if I'm trying to figure out like a sort of hackneyed metaphor for this, they're treating us like credit cards, right? A revolver or whatever is the term of art that you'd want to use on this stuff. And so I wonder if like we can restructure some of these loans so that the meter starts running, right, automatically if they don't get it by a certain point. Not the day that the thing runs, right? But I guarantee you, if that happens, then somebody in the planning office is going to say, yeah, but like the meter's going to start running next month. So maybe we should go faster on this stuff. Because it pains me every time I see that. Because A, the money that's sitting in our coffers that's not dispersed is A, not doing any good in the world, and B, the meter's running on it. Right? So I'm just wondering if there is some
Because
sort
they're
of
not shovel ready?
whatever, right? I don't care. Like, I mean, our job is to
Sure.
like get money out to these like, places. And so if we kind of structure things in a way that gives them all the rope in the world, they're going to hang us with it. Right? And so like, I'm not trying to be like difficult in terms of our relationship with these things, but like, feels like we're getting taken advantage of a little bit here. Right? And so I'm just looking for some structural ways to kind of fix that. Right? And I'm not saying let's be draconian about it, right? I'm not saying let's charge 25% interest the minute that you sign the document, right? But we're so far in the other direction, right? That it's showing up, and one way that it's showing up is it's making it really hard for you to predict, right? And that's kind of important for us. Second thing is, generally speaking, like, given the amounts of importance that is on like the finances of a financial institution, I do recommend again that we actually form a finance subcommittee to look at this in more depth, right? It's very hard to kind of basically look at these types of things inside of the 3 hours that we have once a month. And so I think that would be a really good thing to do. And so I formally recommend that we kind of at least take a look at that. That's all. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Pete. And yes.
Thank you. Along the same lines, and this will be no surprise to Denise because we've talked about this before. So I'll go backwards here in my comments. So I'm probably a little bit ahead of the agenda as far as suggestions for future topics, but I agree with Pete that a little bit more attention by a subcommittee or something like that on financial things that maybe doesn't have to meet every month, but particularly around the times when this financial planning is happening and things like that. And ironically, we've got some financial policy to review later that might have to be updated at some point if we do something like that. And then the second point was back on what Pete was commenting on about getting this clock ticking and things like that. And there are probably undoubtedly rules about what can be done in that regard. But there's a commonly used, very common mechanism called commitment fee. When you take a loan, you have to pay something on the undrawn balance. So once you draw, you're paying interest, and what you don't draw, all the rest of it, that's approved, you pay a commitment fee. It's usually a lot less than what the interest rate is.
But
And there-
something.
But there's something, and there are pros and cons on that. We don't need to get into all of them now. So I would request that maybe this become a future topic for either the board or this committee to understand the intricacies of how that works, because things like commitment fees and so forth is in some cases going to harm the folks who we really don't want to harm, like party communities that are just not organized enough or don't have the resources to respond in a timely manner and things like that, that really can't do anything about it. And so in conjunction with looking at a commitment fee or something like that, we also ought to look at other things that we've discussed before that I know Denise and her staff are looking at, which is a way to evaluate the readiness of the applicant before it's brought to the board and actually have the loan get approved, which is when the clock starts to tick. So it's pretty complicated. And maybe I would appreciate, even as a longtime financial person, understanding what the pros and cons of some of those things are. We've talked about it before, but really not comprehensively and not recently.
Thank you. Dave, did you have something?
Yeah, what I would do is simply echo what Pete and Tim already said. And I think a subcommittee is a good idea, and it does. I bristle every time I think of somebody getting a commitment and then not using it, and it's our money, our cost. I know there are priority communities out there, but I like the idea of digging deeper on this, because I do, this, in my gut, feel like we're being taken advantage of a little bit. People might, they just come to us early, so.
All right. Denise, anything else?
Just a couple of things. I definitely like the suggestions. One thing about when we were doing the policies, I told Joe, there's the ones you are seeing today are the simple ones. I intentionally kept some of these other policies open so that we could talk about them and talk about the things that you all are bringing up. So this is very good feedback. I do think that there is a balancing act at the board that we need to discuss further between kind of the regulatory side versus how fast people can cash flow. And so there is some of that, and we don't want to penalize because they're trying to meet regulatory requirements, so there might be another kind of arm of information that we need to pursue on that. So I think that's all very good discussion, though. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the board? Nothing online?
No, sir.
Thank you very much, Denise, for a comprehensive report. Agenda item number 7, Water Supply Development Committee update. We'll go to Buchanan Davis.
Well, lucky for you all, I seem to lock myself out of my computer and my email. And so.
We have a cybersecurity guy somewhere?
Yeah, exactly. So we'll work on that, but, so I'll keep it short because I'm trying to recall some of my talking points that I had. But the Water Supply Development Committee has been working hard. We've talked a lot about this over the last months of the different sort of tensions and paradoxes that are all baked in that committee. And so we continue to wrestle through that. And, we've grappled with striking the right balance, and are we on the right track with the criteria, and do we need to adjust loans versus grants? And we are approaching, very close to approaching our grant sort of our self-imposed grant. What's the word I'm thinking? Threshold. Yeah, that's the word I'm thinking. But and then we also have asked ourselves, we gave a break on the interest rates on the loans, and for the first year to get the program off the ground, and allowed applicants to get a really, really good deal on loans, and then on top of that, even some more good deals on loans. And but what we did is we passed a resolution through the end of the year that asked staff to continue as we are, to get all the applications that are out there, put them on the PPL, our project priority list, by the end of the year, have them scored, and then to extend those rates at least through the end of the year. And then we also have asked staff to, in that interim, in the next few months, to work on potentially new ideas for a matrix or a criteria matrix, and then we'll reapproach that maybe there. We've also asked them to look at potential funding cycles and such as that, so to give us some ideas. So that's a resolution that as a committee we passed that will get us through the end of the year, And then, potentially we can see some shifts starting next year as we, continue to readjust and reevaluate where we're at. Did I hit that about right, Chelsea?
Absolutely.
All right, that's my update from.
Thank you, Buchanan. Are there any questions from the board? All right. Go to agenda item number 8, long-term water, and turn the time over to Ted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Turn your-
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last week was the water augmentation solicitations deadline for qualified proposers to submit their proposals for evaluation. And the teams that had passed the initial qualification earlier in the year were invited to submit proposals in 4 project categories defined by the solicitation. And those were ocean water, surface water, wastewater reclamation, and other, which is a category that includes everything that doesn't fit into the one of the other 3. I'm pleased to report that WIFA received 6 distinct proposals from 3 qualified proposer teams, and that includes 1 or more proposals in each of those 4 project categories. I'm going to come back to that. This is a critical next step in advancing the robust and transparent solicitation process that is on pace to have teams under contract by the fall of 2025. So that's this year, and it's just in a couple months. That's our goal. And we're on track to that. And this has been an aspiration for a long time. And while we've moved some things around, we're still on pace for that. I'm going to come back to that too when I go off my script here in a minute. What will happen after that happens? Once the evaluation is complete, and some or all of the 6 teams are selected then to go into the next phase. We call it phase 2. Remarkable name. After having completed phase 1, during which those teams that are selected by the evaluation committee will move to the next part of the process, which is to do some work to flesh out their specific proposals to get them ready for the next milestone, which is who then is going to be chosen to actually develop and build projects, which is where we all want to get to at some point. And those submitting teams they're shown on the screen there. Acciona Fengate Water Augmentation Alliance, EPCOR Water Innovation Partners, and Zerata LLC. In accordance with WIFA's procurement rules and to maintain the solicitation's competitiveness, the proposals will be evaluated confidentially. Even the board members will not be involved in that evaluation. But the details of each proposal will be available when the board announces which, if any, of the teams have been offered contracts for further concept development. Or upon conclusion of the procurement. So that or I think is in there, meaning that nothing comes out of the procurement. But assuming that something does, we'll move then into phase 2, and that's only a couple of months away. The 6 proposals that we received will now be evaluated by WIFA staff to determine whether they are responsive to the criteria outlined in the solicitation. So many of you who are involved at any level with procurement hears terms like responsive and responsible. So that's what the team will be looking for, and those criteria are spelled out in the solicitation so the proposers know what standard they're going to be held to as they're being evaluated for moving further through the process. The proposals that are determined to be responsive will be further evaluated and scored, and then proposals which are recommended for award by the evaluation committee will be sent to the Long-Term Water Augmentation Committee first, and then the Long-Term Water Augmentation Committee will pass its recommendation, which may or may not be the same as the evaluation team, to the board, and the board has a final discretion about which of those proposers that have made it to that point will move forward after that. As a reminder to the public, the purpose of the solicitation was to seek out qualified teams to partner with WIFA and examine the feasibility of the proposed augmentation options. As such, WIFA may award multiple, one, or none of the contracts through this process. So having 6, I'm really optimistic, and I think the committee members and the board members generally will be optimistic with this outcome. So I would like to actually go even more off script than I already have here and just provide some dates and some context. The long-term water augmentation effort is only one of the many things that WIFA is responsible for. And we did get started on this right away as a board. I'm starting with an unsolicited proposal that came in immediately upon the formation of this board in late 2022. Some work on long-term water augmentation was completed by the full board, such as an RFI, some needs assessments, and things like that. But in April of 2024, the board passed a resolution that instructed the staff to bring a solicitation proposal back, because this would basically be a process, back to the board for consideration. And the staff did that. The Long-Term Water Augmentation Committee itself began to meet in June and had a series of very quickly paced meetings to go through and develop, in conjunction with the staff and the consultants, a solicitation which then was approved by the committee in October and brought to the board in November of 2024. All that happened in 2024. Here we are now in 2025. And we proceeded with phase ones and these submissions and all of that, and they've gone through preliminary qualification, and now some offers have been made, and they're going to be evaluated. And we expect to have the culmination of that process be in October of 2025. So April 2024, the board says go. October, November 2024, the committee and the board says, here's the solicitation, and it's published. 1 year later, almost 1 year later, in August, we have 6 proposals. They're going to be evaluated. And 2 months from now, 1 year from that, October, November of last year ago, 1 year it took to get to the point, then we will have project teams, hopefully at least one, hopefully more, will be selected to go into phase 2. And the reason I bring that up is there was some skepticism, some concern, and really just a lot of lack of experience and knowledge by any of us, including us on this board, about the method that we were following with this solicitation. It was a different way of doing things, but the committee and the board came to the conclusion with lots of help and input that having this multi-pronged approach with different types of technologies was preferable than a kind of a one-at-a-time thing for let's do a desal plant, or let's do this, or let's do that. It's a wide open door, and it happened. My point here is that in a very short period of time, relatively, we made a lot of progress. We have results that I can't see these results being produced from a more traditional procurement plan. And so I'm hopefully most of the doubters have left the room now, that we still have a lot to do. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. It's not time to celebrate yet, but this is a real process. It's producing results by companies that are well known and real, that have done this type of work before. Back to the script. I would like to thank those that responded to the solicitation for their interest in partnering with the state of Arizona to respond to our evolving water needs. We continue to face water challenges at every level, with the outcome of the Colorado River being the most critical. I'll make another side comment here. There was some mention earlier this morning about the August 24-month study that was published just a week ago or so by the Bureau of Reclamation, that we will be in Tier 1. We'll be in Tier 1 again. But that's based on a projection that at the end of this year, we will be at elevation 1055, if I'm remembering correctly, for Lake Mead. So it's the second year in a row. It didn't get worse. We're still in Tier 1, but it's only 5 feet above the next tier trigger, which is elevation 1050. So it is getting worse. So somebody else mentioned this morning that WIFA, I think it was Judah, WIFA is the next stop for new water supplies, as the existing water supplies that we have as a state are impaired, reduced, or go away in some other means. And that's why this is so important. If chosen for development, these augmentation projects that are on this list here would work in tandem with other things that are being done: conservation, efficiency, surface and groundwater management strategies. We heard about some of those this morning, helping to maintain a diverse and resilient water portfolio for the state. So as long as I'm thanking people, I'd also like to thank, of course, the staff, the consultants, outside counsel for their expertise. And again, I'll make the point, we have a lot more to do in phase 2 and phase 3, and actually having a point where some of us will be pushing red buttons or something at some point in time and watching water come out of some piece of infrastructure is probably being measured in years rather than months. But great job so far, everybody. I'm very excited, if you can't tell. I never would have predicted this. I'd hoped for this outcome, but I never would have predicted it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ted. Appreciate your board and staff. Don't want to steal any of your thunder. I'll let your words speak for themselves. And I wanted to congratulate everybody here in getting to this point. So thank you. I think it's appropriate. We'll take a 10-minute recess and reconvene at
Mr.
10:25.
Chair.
Oh, sorry.
There is one request to speak on this.
Okay.
In favor is Sam Peters with the Coalition for the National Infrastructure Bank. Sam, I don't see him online, but if you are, please raise your hand.
I looked to the screen and didn't see any raised hands. Okay,
All right, there he is. Let me.
there he is.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm just a concerned citizen from the Southwest, and I'm affiliated with some other people out there who are, we feel a sense of panic about the water shortage, and we feel that we would like some attention to be given to the possibility of there being a large pipeline created from the Atchafalaya River in Louisiana to Lake Powell near the Glen Canyon Dam. And we ourselves are trying to get a feasibility study created for that. But we feel that what really has held people up is as we've looked at some of these water studies in the past, it's just been the question of, well, if you take water from, the Missouri or whatever, people downstream are not going to like that. They're having less. So you get water from a place where no one is needing it anymore. And that's really what the case is with the Atchafalaya, a distributary of the Mississippi. So anyway, we would like that to be just put on the table for consideration. And we ourselves are pursuing getting feasibility studies made for that. Just wanted the group to know. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And we're going to recognize Pete.
Cool. Thank you. Pete Kim. First of all, congratulations on getting the process to this point. It was a mammoth effort by a lot of folks, but Mr. Cook, you shouldered a lot of that load, and I want to really recognize that because it's been a lot of work, and you did a great job. I'll just note that a little bit, I just want to see, EPCOR is 2/3 of the proposals, right? So that's interesting to me. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it stuck out. So I just wanted to put that on there. And then the final thing is going to be throughout this process, we've got an important decision to make. And I'm just going to state that I'm always going to ask the same questions, right? So I might as well ask them now just to start the pattern. How much water is each of these projects and where does it go? How much does it cost and when do we get it? And so I don't know if it's appropriate for us to sort of be able to summarize those things without talking about details. But I'm curious, right? Are we talking about 2 gallons of water or 2 billion gallons of water, right? Where does it go? How much is it going to cost? And when do we get it? So at the appropriate times, I'm sure those questions will be answered, but just to flag that those are the questions that I'm always going to ask.
And Mr. Chair, I'm happy to address that question. So you are correct that this is not the appropriate time for us to reveal details about these proposals. We take very seriously the competitive nature of the solicitation. So this is as much public information as we are allowed essentially to provide. It is probably more than you would see in a typical procurement, honestly. But the questions you have obviously are valid, and that is the kind of information that the Long-Term Augmentation Committee and then ultimately the board will have before it makes decisions on these proposals, right? You're not going to be asked to make any decisions without seeing the information you need to make those decisions. It's just not public information at this point. So all of that will be a very controlled rollout when it is available. And then once you've made your decision, that rollout becomes much broader for the public itself.
I think it might be appropriate to explain why this is necessary, right? Because there's, let's be honest, everybody always expects that there's some backroom deal going on, and I know that's not what's happening here, but the controlled rollout of the information, right, might appear to some. So let's just take the opportunity to say why we're doing it this way and why it's a good thing.
Sure, happy to do that. So the short answer is procurements are governed by rules under Arizona's administrative code and Arizona statute. So I'm going to sound a little like Joe right now and say that we are obligated to keep information confidential under administrative code R18-15-808 subsection D. Confidentiality in procurement isn't unique to WIFA's procurement. This would happen if there was a state agency asking for pencils or facial tissue, right? And there's a whole laundry list of statutes that govern that in section 41 of Arizona Revised Statutes, section R2 of the Administrative Code. Happy to send you those if you want them, but trust me, you don't. Offers are supposed to be and will be evaluated according to the criteria in the solicitation, right? We're not comparing these offers against each other. These offers are independent, competing against the terms in the contract, or the terms and the conditions set out by the solicitation itself. So one of the dangers in allowing public comment, public scrutiny of the proposals at this stage is that then there's undue influence of that evaluation. That instead of evaluating those projects based on the criteria in the solicitation, which this board approved, now you're evaluating those based on which one you like better. And that's not going to be the role of the committee or the board. It is going to be which of these best suits the issues or best suits the criteria of the solicitation itself. The other thing I will mention is that the confidential part of this procurement is only in the first phase, our very creatively named phases, right? There are 3 phases to this, and once this first phase is over, once this board has awarded contracts to between 0 and 6 of the offers listed on this screen, then everything becomes completely public in terms of this procurement file, as well as the rest of the decisions that the board is making. As I think Chairman Cook did a very good job of threading the needle between this is not the big decision. This is a really exciting thing, and this is really great to know that this is not a pipe dream, to use a pun, right? There are 6 legitimate proposals from 3 legitimate teams, but this is not us deciding which of those the state's going to invest in. This is us deciding which of those needs to move forward into that next phase of feasibility analysis, at which point we will not only allow public comment and allow public scrutiny, but welcome that and create the systems to make that public comment and scrutiny as easy to facilitate as possible. So that's the short-ish version, honestly. But that is why the structure of the procurement is the way that it is, to balance the need for competitiveness and for maintaining the integrity of the procurement and the need and the desire of this board to have as much public input and transparency as possible.
I really like that answer, not only because you cited the actual code numbers, but because you told us why. Because I think a lot of folks will just say it's the law and here's the code. Then you just go, yeah, but does that make any sense? And you explained why. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Director McGuire. And we'll take a recess till 10:32. We're going to reconvene. Welcome everybody back. It's 10:34. Buchanan is still here. He's in the other room and will rejoin us momentarily. Do you want to go ahead and call roll, or do you want to just proceed?
Yeah, let's go ahead and call roll since we were there. So, Mr. Beckham,
Present.
Mr. Cook,
Here.
Mr. Davis is present, Ms. Horseman,
Present.
Mr. John, Mr. Tamier,
Here.
Mr. Kim,
Here.
and Chairman Lyons.
Yep,
All right.
good to go. And we want to recognize Gail Griffin has joined us as well. We're going to go to the consent agenda where we will consider items 9 through 19. And they'll be considered as a group and acted upon by one motion with no separate discussion unless otherwise requested by a board member. A reminder to those attending virtually, please ensure you are unmuted for the vote. Would any of the board like to consider any item separately?
Chairman, can I just make one comment?
Yes, please.
Yeah, as part of the consent agenda, there was this letter by the Sierra Club. And frankly, I thought it was pretty darn cogent and spot on in a lot of respects. So, and I noticed that Lindsay did summarize it in our board book. And I thought it was very interesting and that a lot of those points I think we should be taking into account.
Well, I can open up, Mr. Beckham, I can open up the call to the public right now, and if you'd like to comment further on that?
Or we can pull it off and we can.
No, I
Okay.
think that's all. That's all
Okay.
I wanted to say.
All right.
And then from there, I have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
We have one hand up, David.
Okay.
Patrice?
Yes, I would like to remove from the consent agenda item number 11 and number 13.
Okay, so there is a motion on the floor to remove item 11 and 13. Do we have a second?
This is Pete Kim, my second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Abstaining? Okay, motion carries. Do we have a motion on the floor to approve items 9 through 19 with the exception of 11 and 13?
So move. This is Tim.
Thank you, Tim. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Any abstained? Okay, let's go to item number 11.
So while Ben is queuing this up on the PowerPoint, this is Resolution 2026-20 for the town of Prescott Valley. And I will have Scott Connolly lead us in a quick discussion, if you don't mind, Scott. On Prescott Valley. Yep.
Put the speaker on there for a minute. And I'll just represent what I presented to the Federal Programs Committee. And then if there's any questions, we can go to staff or the borrower.
Scott, is your speaker on?
Move it closer.
There you go.
So, okay, so basically I will represent what I presented to the Federal Programs Committee and then at the end, open it up for questions to the staff. And I do know we have Neil Wadsworth from Prescott Valley in the audience here today too. So the town of Prescott Valley is seeking 4.17 million in funding to remove PFAS contamination from its Quailwood well number 3. This well, along with 4 other wells, were shut down in August of 22 for exceeding safe PFAS limits. As the largest and highest production well in the Quailwood area, well number 3 has been identified as the most critical and ideally located well to begin initial PFAS treatment using an ion exchange treatment system at the well site. Restoring this well provides a vital water source while also serving as a pilot for future PFAS treatment projects. Currently, design and pilot testing using a small-scale ion exchange column are underway with full-scale construction to begin upon ADEQ approval and final design construction. The WIFA loan will be used to pay the construction costs in excess of the 2.1 million grant received from the EPA's Community Grant Fund. The town of Prescott Valley is pledging its drinking water revenue and currently has no debt with this pledge. However, it does have a concurrent loan application pledging with the Water Supply Development Fund that is using the same pledge. Over the previous 5 years, the drinking water system's net revenue was at least $2 million annually. In fiscal year 2023, the town implemented a multi-year rate increase that it's ending in 2028 that will increase rates annually 3 to 5%. Projections indicate the town will achieve a debt service coverage ratio in excess of 1.5 times when including the debt service of both proposed loans, which is the state revolving fund and the water supply development loan. A higher level of forgivable principal, 3.75 million or 90% was applied to this loan request as it qualifies for specific funding from the Emerging Contaminants through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Like I mentioned, we do have a representative from the borough, Neil Wadsworth, the utilities director, and the staff, and the loan officer was Evan Marth, the project manager was Morgan Burgess, and we'll open it up for any questions that we may have.
Are there any questions from the board? And the applicant is present. Would you like to speak?
Thank you, Chairman Lyons, board members, Director McGuire and staff. I appreciate the opportunity to come down and talk to you today.
Can you make sure your mic's on, the green light's on?
Okay, now it's on. Did everybody catch that last part?
No.
Okay. Yeah, so appreciate coming down here today. We had another project that you guys approved on consent just a moment ago. We appreciate that. And I don't believe we've had a loan from WIFA for about 20 years now. So we're glad to be back in front of you. We do have a lot of upcoming projects. This is one of them. Just as a summary, we started working on the PFAS issues as soon as we determined that we had PFAS present in our system. That was a couple years ago. City of Prescott, next door to us, tested positive at one of their wells located near an airport up there. And we had 5 wells test positive throughout our system in various locations. 3 of them were down in the Quailwood area, which is down in our lower system. And of the wells down in that area, the Quailwood well number 3 is the highest producing well in that area, and we want to keep capacity in our system, and so we'd like to get that one back online. The other 2 are smaller wells, and at this point, the economics don't make a whole lot of sense for us to be spending millions and millions of dollars on each well that we have to do. And so we're looking at doing one right now. We're before we started this, we hired Jacobs Engineering to start looking at other options. We looked at blending from other well sources, and then we also looked at on-site blending combined with treatment, and we looked at granular activated carbon and ion exchange. So we've done a lot of studies moving towards this point. We are already about a month and a half or 2 months into a piloting exercise at the Quailwood well number 3. We're looking at multiple different ion exchange media, and we're also piloting different levels of pretreatment filtration because we have issues potentially with sediment, but we're also seeing manganese and iron as being potential inhibitors to the ion exchange process. So we've already spent around $600,000 to get us to this point. And we have told our residents that we were not going to put any of the wells back online that had PFAS concentrations higher than the EPA limits. We didn't know what those limits were when we started this process because we started the studies and such before the EPA finally developed their limits, their final limits. And so our target is that the piloting experiment or exercise will be done by December. Concurrently, we're already into 30% design, but we will need the pilot information to reach final design and nail everything down. As soon as that happens, we're moving forward with getting the project out to bid. And in fact, in order to help expedite, we know that there's a lot of lead time issues on electrical equipment these days, potentially ion exchange vessels. And so we're looking at pre-purchasing those directly so that, you know, we've already got that in process months before we get the project awarded. And so I think that basically is a summary of the project and where we're at. And I don't know if you have any specific questions that you'd like me to answer for you.
We do have one, and we're gonna go to Patrice Horseman first.
Thank you, and it was hard to hear, but I think I caught most of what you had to say. I'm appearing virtually, so it's a little bit harder for me, and I apologize for that. My concerns are, and just wanted to make sure that you do have a readiness to proceed on this, and that your technology for the PFAS removal is a decision you have already made. I know you've talked about studies and piloting and continuing your experiments, which you hope to have completed by December. And so I want to make sure that you are going to be ready to proceed, especially in light of the discussion we just had about folks holding off, getting money and holding off on projects. And then also that you're that you have in fact decided on the technology you feel is going to be sufficient.
Yes, thank you for the question. So as I've mentioned, we've already spent $600,000 to move it to this point. You know, some of the funds we're asking for is to reimburse ourselves for that. And so we will be drawing on the loan fairly quickly here. We looked at two different types of media. We looked at granular activated carbon. We looked at ion exchange. We know we've got to go with ion exchange for a couple of reasons. One is the ion exchange vessels are significantly larger than ion exchange, and our sites won't accommodate that. Additionally, with having to backwash the granular activated carbon, most of our well sites are not located in areas like close to a sewer system, and so having to have additional tankage on site to contain that backwash or somehow dispose of that, it wasn't ideal for us. And so we are committed to using ion exchange. As I mentioned, there's 6 different columns that we're testing. I don't know if that's 6 different media or, you know, several different media anyways, with various types of pre-filtration. And so, yeah, once we get to December, even before then, we're hoping that the design will be moving along at the same time, and that we will be ready to go about that time frame to move forward with bidding the project. I hope that addresses your questions.
Patrice,
Yes, thank you.
are there any other questions from the board? Have you identified the source of PFAS? How many wells are affected?
Yes, thank
We
you.
just, and the only reason I asked that is because we just recently went through an exercise surrounding one of the air stations and it was the federal government that conducted it on behalf of the community, because they knew what the source was, but have you identified the source?
We have not. We believe that likely most of it is coming from consumers and you know, whatever ends up in your, you know, being flushed down the toilet, and any exposure from, you know, cosmetics, suntan lotion, anything that's used in the households that can end up getting into the wastewater. We believe that's the source of most of it. The 3 wells that were impacted in the Quailwood area, the Quailwood area is downstream, a couple miles from our wastewater treatment plant. We had 2 other wells, one of them in the central part of Prescott Valley that was affected also, and then another well in our, what we call our North Well Field, which is in the northwest part of Prescott Valley. And it's a mile or a mile and a half from the Prescott Airport. And you might suspect or assume that, well, okay, it's coming from, you know, the airport, just like the city of Prescott's well. The problem is you know, there's a lot of geology that goes into looking at these things. That's not the only well in that area. In fact, there are several other wells closer to the Prescott area, Prescott Airport, that did not detect positive for PFAS. So the 2, the one in the central part and the one in the northwestern part, we're not sure. We are keeping an eye on one of those because it is in fact our largest producing well. It's currently hovering at about 3 parts per billion. And so, you know, we're not moving forward with anything on that because it's one of our larger wells. It's a 2,000 gallon a minute well. In order to do, whether we look at blending, whether we look at ion exchange, you know, we're talking about a $10 million project just for one well, although it is a significant well for us. But yeah, we don't have any direct understanding of what the sources are other than assuming or concluding that probably the wastewater is the culprit for the Quailwood area.
And the tolerances as determined by the EPA, and where are you guys at in comparison?
Well, so the 4 trillion number for the PFOA and the PFOS, for, like I said, the one well, we're at 3 parts per billion. The 3 down in Quailwood are above the 4 number. And for the Quailwood well number 3, we're sitting about 7 or 8. So not significantly high, but enough to where, you know, it will preclude us from using that well in the future. But we've made the commitment, like I said, to our citizens that we're not going to turn them back on if they do exceed the EPA number until we get that taken care of.
Okay, thank you. Good. Karen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With respect to sourcing, where PFAS comes from, there is a pretty good correlation of PFAS contamination in source water near facilities that have used AFFF firefighting foam, which is required in military installations, which is why you see a lot of this around Air Force bases and airports. But generally, I mean, as the gentleman indicated, PFAS does occur in households, in just about everything that we use in daily life. And so we do see it in wastewater. And there's no one to go after necessarily for the cost of dealing with PFAS, which is why the forgivable principle for these types of emerging contaminants is so important, is that we just need to tackle it. We just need to throw everything we have at it. And this area of the state has had hits starting when we first started testing back in 22. So I'm glad to see them getting this far.
Thank you. Pete?
So this is more of a comment, maybe a discussion point, I don't know. Just seems to me that the pervasiveness, and this is really for you, Karen, the pervasiveness of this chemical, I mean, it's everywhere. And it's dangerous. And I don't know like where the money's going to come from to clean it all up everywhere, right? I mean, this gentleman here is cleaning up in his wells, and it's $10 million or something, like you said, for, you know, one of these things, or $4 million. If you add all that up times everywhere,
yeah,
that's kind of a lot of money. And so, you know, that's just the.
Pete, if you're still speaking, we cannot hear you online.
Sorry about that. I won't subject you to all that again, but what I will do is I'll reach out to you afterwards and just give you the bulk of my comments. But that's basically it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board? All right, at this time, I'd entertain a motion for item number 11. Loan Resolution 2026-010, Town of Prescott Valley.
This is David Beckham. I move to approve loan resolution 2026-010.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second, Buchanan Davis. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any additional discussion? If not, any abstained? All right, motion carries. Thank you very much. We'll go on to item number 13. Consideration to adopt the Water Supply Development Project Priority List Funding Cycle 2026.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And in the absence of Lindsay, I will do my best to explain why this is on the agenda, first of all, and then also go through some of the public comments that Mr. Beckham noted. So typically, the PPL is something that the committees approve by matter of course at their meetings. Every year, however, we do, by our rule, need to bring, or our policy need to bring the PPL to you as the board to approve sort of the fiscal year funding cycle. Now, understand that just like on the SRF side, the Water Supply Development Revolving Fund PPL is a fluid document. We add to it as we receive applications, and then it is updated as we approve those applications. So that's why you're seeing it. I know that's not typically something that we would see or that we would bring to you on this agenda. But then to summarize the public comments received, as Mr. Beckham said, the Sierra Club Grand Canyon chapter did submit comments regarding the fiscal year 2026 project priority list. We very much appreciate their attention to this and their engagement with us. The comments included several projects that they noted for particular support. So those are projects for the city of Cottonwood, the city of Bisbee, the Mojave County Flood Control District, and the town of Clarkdale. But generally, the chapter expressed some concerns over projects in kind of broad categories. So that included projects that involve new groundwater pumping or could increase current groundwater pumping. It included projects that have a limited direct water benefit and projects that would benefit privately owned systems. So we very much appreciate the comments that the chapter made. We will be submitting, as is our policy, written responses to those comments. They're available in your board materials if you haven't yet reviewed them, and if the public would like to review them, I highly encourage you to do so. I will just make a note too, that this project priority list is not all pending applications, right? So some of the projects that were commented on by the chapter have already been acted on by this board. I will remind anybody who wants to that our committee meetings and our board meetings do include the opportunity for comment on these projects as they come up too. So definitely happy to see the attention that's being paid and very much appreciate the input of the chapter.
Any questions? Dave?
Yeah, I do. I read it myself, and then of course, I read the Sierra Club letter. But I'm gonna bring an example up, and that's item number 34, which is Chino Valley, and it's for a new well. And let me give you context. I was on the board of the Nature Conservancy for 10 years. I've worked along with Kim to ensure our flows of the Verde River, and I find that to be very important. That there is some folks who say that the pumping in Chino Valley can impact the Verde. And now, so I'm giving that as context for my background. Is it our role here to have that be a consideration? You know, we're to provide water and to help our communities gain water. And as much as I want to protect the flows of the Verde, I don't know that that's our obligation, and we even have the facilities to analyze whether a new well in the Chino Valley would affect the Verde, and whether that can be part of our evaluation criteria. I know the Sierra Club wants us to do that, but I don't know that we should. I don't know that that's our statutory role here, nor do I know if we're really equipped to take that into consideration. So I'm a little torn on that, honestly, despite my fervent belief that we want to protect the waters of the Verde. So it's a comment and a bit of a question too, because I really don't know the answer to what we should be considering here and what our statutory role is.
I see Mr. Chamier has his hand up, but I'm happy to respond to the comment or the question first.
Yeah,
if you'd like.
absolutely.
Okay.
Let's go to you.
So I think Mr. Beckham, you correctly brought it back to your statutory authority, right? And as the Water Supply Development Fund has evolved and was given to WIFA to administer and was given funding to WIFA to administer, the statute very clearly lines out the eligibility for projects and the criteria that this board takes into consideration. Now, that criteria does have some flexibility. There's some gray area. And if this board wanted to come to staff and tell us that you have particular priorities within this project or within this program, we would be happy to accommodate those priorities. Whether that is an obligation, if those priorities are not explicitly listed out in the statute, it is not an obligation. So I think it is very much up to the board how they want to structure, how they want the flavor, if you will, of these projects to go, what they want to prioritize, and the kind of information you'd like staff to bring to you to help you make those decisions.
Thank you. And Tim, we see your hand is raised, but I'm going to ask Joe if he wants to say anything on that. Since we have, our resident attorney here.
Not at this time, but happy to provide a report or a follow-up if the board would like.
Yeah, absolutely. And we appreciate the comments from Director McGuire. Tim, go ahead. We'll recognize you now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just my perspective on that. wrestling with my own hand in the air. My perspective on that line of discussion is that we have the Arizona Department of Water Resources that regulates permitting and management of wells and aquifers and things of that nature. So I strongly defer to ADWR on those matters. Thank you.
Laney, would you like to comment on that? Okay. I appreciate that. All right, I'll bring it back to the board. Okay.
Just one other comment, Mr. Chair, and it's probably superfluous, but I do appreciate getting the letter from the Sierra Club. It's very helpful. The Sierra Club did not, and rightfully so, ask this board to do anything like, don't include these projects that we have concerns with or anything like that, and I wouldn't expect them to do that. But basically, that is what this process is all about, in my opinion. And while it's important for us to follow our statutory duty and consider things that we're obligated to consider, and probably also consider things that there's not an obligation to consider that we feel is relevant to these various requests. But that's what this process is all about. On each project that's on here, there will be opportunities at the committee, there will be opportunities at the board for these type of concerns to be brought forward. I wouldn't doubt on the project we've been talking about here just a minute ago about Chino Valley and the Upper Verde, that there would be probably other interested parties that would want to talk to us about their opinion on this project and maybe some others. But this is why we're here to do these kind of things, is to bring all those things out into the present and make a decision based on all of the considerations. So I'm happy to receive this kind of feedback.
Thank you, Ted. We're going to recognize Patrice.
Yes, and Ted just said it, but I agree 100%. First, I want to thank the Sierra Club for taking the time to take a look at this and to, quite frankly, provide us such thoughtful response and input. I think that's important. And I do see it is our responsibility, I think, to look at this and bring this forward when we're making decisions on projects. So I really want to thank the Sierra Club for doing this. I think we certainly taken a look at that, and both the situation, which quite frankly, when it was brought, I had some concerns, and that's just the use of the artificial turf, which reduces irrigation needs, but what else does it create? And I think you're right. I think these are more discussions for our subcommittees and input that we need to provide at that level. And I would also, I think we've talked about the town of Chino Valley and the well. One thing just to note, when we're talking about groundwater, rural Arizona still doesn't have groundwater, so ADEQ is not necessarily really having that kind of oversight. So I do think it's appropriate that we discuss these at the committee levels, and we bring them forth when we're evaluating these projects. So thank you.
Thank you, Patrice. Any other comments or questions from the board? If not, I will entertain a motion. Ted.
Yes, I recommend that the board adopt water supply development project priority list funding cycle for 2026 as presented.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Buchanan. Do we have any additional board member discussion? No additional discussion. We'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstained? If none, the motion does pass. Thank you very much. And we're going to go into the regular agenda, item number 20. Fiscal reporting and operations policy review. Joe, your opportunity to shine.
Thank you, Chairman Lyons. I hope everyone wasn't too comfortable going a few meetings without some policy reviews, because we are back again in the new fiscal year. Today, we've got one policy recommended for modification and 6 for termination. We're diving into the financial policies right now, so expect to see these coming back over the next couple of meetings, some additional ones for your review. The policies recommended for termination today really are just procedures masquerading as policies. They were provided in the board book. You can see they do a little bit more than document routine day-to-day operations. So we do recommend termination for those. Staff also recommends modifying policy V2 for the WIFA financial summary, and we did provide the board with a proposed modification retitled for financial reports. The purpose of this policy is to document for the board what routine reports will be generated by staff and when those reports will be made available or presented to the board. So really your opportunity to speak directly to the staff and say, this is the information I want. These are the data points that I want to see. This is how frequently I want them. Staff's particularly interested in what those reports or components, additional components the board would like to see, but I will turn it over to Denise for some more information. When she's done, we will be asking for two separate motions from the board today. First, to approve the termination. You can do that as a bulk, and then second, to approve the modification of the policy as presented. But Denise, I'll turn it over to you.
So this might be tricky. Ben, do you want to unhide the next slide? I did a slide to just summarize all the reports that we've put in V2, which is a WIFA financial summary. So we took the approach on this round of reviews of, okay, how do we want to start the fiscal year and how do we want to carry through as far as reporting? You know, I've been here for a couple of years now, so I'd really like to know what the board's feedback is on what we're providing and if there's things we need in addition to what we're doing or whatever your feedback is on that front. The rest, as Joe mentioned, these aren't really, to me, policies. These are more procedures, you know, things that EPA tells us how to do. Or, you know, obviously, we're going to do a single audit if we're required to do a single audit. Also, I combined, instead of having a separate policy for each report, I basically tried to put all of the reporting into one policy so that we could kind of look at it from a holistic perspective for the whole year. One other thing I'll say is I know there's a 3 times versus quarterly on some of these. Some of that is related to our ability to do reports at the beginning, especially the first quarter of a fiscal year, because we're so busy doing audits, financial plan, that the first 3 months, even budget-wise, isn't that informative. However, I welcome any feedback on that. So that's just kind of an overview. We do have many more financial policies that we need to go through. So these are just kind of the easy hanging fruit or low hanging fruit is what we started off with.
Thank you. Bring it back to the board. Any questions and or discussion?
I think this is a perfect thing for the finance committee to like kind of dive into, right? In terms of like, there's a lot of stuff in there and it's going to be, I think that it requires a little bit more discussion. Generally speaking, I'm okay with it in terms of the, as the first tranche. But I think that like, you know, rather than like kind of do this piecemeal through like a whole bunch of like, you know, meetings, like, I think we can probably just like form the committee, break its back inside of there and then go forward. But as far as these are concerned, I'm okay.
Wonderful. All right. And Joe, you wanted 2 specific motions, right?
Sure, I think you can bulk motion it if the board is so inclined to do so. So a motion to approve the termination of policies V1, V3, V4, V11, V12, and V13. And you can second do a motion to approve the modification of V2, again, if the board is so inclined.
Okay. At this time, I would present that opportunity to the board and entertain a motion as presented by council.
Pete Kim, so moved.
And to clarify, Pete, is that motion to then approve the termination of policies V1, V3, V4, V11, V12, and V13?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. We've got 2 seconds. Tertiary approval. Do we have any board member discussion? All right, no further discussion. We'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Motion passes. Thank you.
And then we need a motion for the modification of V2.
Okay, I'd entertain that motion at this time.
This is Pete Kim, so moved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Let's see. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Motion passes. Thank you. Agenda item 21, approval of the 5-year strategic framework. Director McGuire.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So at the last meeting, you will remember that we brought a draft of the 5-year strategic framework for discussion by this board. We did not receive any further feedback on the framework, so this is the same thing that we presented to you before. There was a request, and instead of making a separate agenda item, I just figured I would discuss it in the context of this agenda item, to talk about what we do. And I think we've actually heard a lot of this today, just in general, talking about WIFA's goals and mission and how we decide the right way to go forward on those. But a request that this process be something a little bit more in-depth than staff bringing something to board and board talking about it, but that we actually have staff or an opportunity for the board to meet and talk about the 5-year strategic framework in a more detailed format. I think that's a fantastic idea, and you commit to this board that that will be something we implement. And I think that Mr. Kim mentioned it as something we could do with new board members, as we do have some of you potentially rotating off in January. And I think that timing makes a lot of sense, doing something at the beginning of the calendar year versus the beginning of the fiscal year, so that we can implement that into our thoughts and our plans for the fiscal year. So that is a long-winded way of me saying that I am committing to this board, and that you all should be looking out for an invitation to some sort of strategic planning meeting as we go forward at the beginning of the next calendar year. But for today, so that we do have a strategic framework that can guide our interaction with other agencies, with the legislature, with the public, I would request that this board approve the 5-year strategic framework as presented.
Any questions? David?
I'll just make a quick comment to what Chelsea just said, and that is, we had to create a 5-year framework from scratch roughly 3 years ago. And it took a lot of time and effort and a lot of interaction among our board members at the time. This is really a modification to that, so I understand why you essentially short-circuited the process a bit, because we had so much already. I think it's very well written. The modifications you've made are I think are excellent. And I do, of course, I have to confess, being an old board member who was involved in that first one, I didn't really appreciate the concept that, yes, there are new board members, we need to go through this process again. So I think that is a good idea to do that for the next one.
Thank you, David. Any other questions or comments from the board? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve the 5-year strategic framework as proposed.
This is Pete Kim, second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Agenda item 22, we're going to go to you, Ben. Do we have any comments?
Mr. Chair, we have one, Dawn Safekeys, Coalition for the National Infrastructure Bank, wishing to speak.
Okay. Don, we'll turn the time over to you.
Dawn, if you are online, please raise your hand. We will unmute you.
Doesn't look like.
Don't see anyone. That was all the speakers we had.
Okay. Appreciate that. Agenda item number 23, agenda development. This is the opportunity for members to identify any topics they would like to be placed on the agenda at a future meeting. Director McGuire, will turn the time over to you, but before we do that, I would like to request an update on the Water Conservation Grant Fund and where we stand on that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We will add that to the next agenda. There will be some issues we want to discuss with this board in terms of tabled applications that you tabled and we haven't done anything with, and what we want to do with those applications, as well as our administrative costs and needs for that program. So very much appreciate you putting that on the agenda for us. I've also heard already in this meeting a discussion of a finance subcommittee. I will commit to bringing that discussion to you in the next meeting in September, and then potentially some drawdown acceleration initiatives. So those may be some things that that subcommittee would want to discuss. So for sure, talking more about that finance subcommittee and the Water Conservation Grant Fund, but also open to any other agenda items from the board or things that you'd like us to cover.
Thank you. Pete?
In light of the testimony today and the presentation today about the state of the cybersecurity state of our water infrastructure, which scared the living daylights out of me, the questions that were important were, what percentage of our water is already compromised? We don't know. Who's going to fix this? Volunteers. That's not good. So I'd like to ask staff to figure out, like, what, if anything, WIFA's role should be in attempting to move forward in addressing this issue. I'm not saying that we should, I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but I'd like to examine what that would mean.
Thank you, Pete. Do we have any other requests from the board?
Well,
David?
Yeah, and our presenter did say that he would follow up with respect to whether the major cities in Arizona responded and how comprehensively. And I do want to have that followed up on. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
And that may just be communication to you as the board, or it could be a separate agenda item. It'll just depend on,
Sure.
yeah, what we receive.
Last call from the board for agenda development. If not, thank you. We'll go to agenda item 24. Director McGuire. Next meeting.
Next meeting will be September 17th, here in this building. You've already added a few things to the agenda. We will not at that point have additional water supply projects for you to consider because we couldn't get the committee together with enough of them to meet until after the 17th. So it won't be very project heavy, but clearly it'll be a lot of other topic heavy. So we look forward to seeing you all then.
Thank you. Time is 11:14 and this meeting is adjourned.